Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our global journey to NYU Prague. My name is Marianne Petit. I am from the Office of Global Programs in New York, and I am here to introduce Jurgi Pehe, the site director for NYU Prague. Jurgi is an affiliated faculty member at New York University Center for European and Mediterranean Studies. In addition to being the director of NYU Prague, from September 1997 to May 1999, he was director of the political department of Czech President Václav Havel and later served as President Havel's advisor. He previously served as director of Central European Research at the Research Institute of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty in Munich, Germany. He's a political analyst and the author of 6 books on politics, as well as 4 novels. He has written extensively on developments in Eastern Europe for American, Czech, German periodicals and academic publications. So I'd like to welcome Jurgi here and hand over the program to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Marian. So welcome, everyone. We are happy that we can share with you our thoughts about Prague, about our program, which, of course, is right now partly suspended because of the corona crisis, but we all hope that it will be we will be back in full strength very soon. When we talked about what to talk about in this seminar, we thought about the tension that exists between the past history, and the present and future, of course, because Prague is a city that, of course, has a very rich history. You can see part of it right behind me. All of the old buildings were from the small square, Malé náměstí, as we call it, where some of the historical events that shaped this country took place. But also, if I were not sitting at this, or I was not showing you this particular picture, I could show you the modern face of Prague with a lot of new buildings which host now international companies, technological giants, and so on. So there's this tension that we can see in some other countries between which jumped from a rather, I would say, not dynamic past, which we experienced under communism, and before that under the Nazi occupation here, into the future. And as such, the Czech Republic skipped, one could say, several historical periods, at least technologically. So you would see here some of the phenomena you could see in some East Asian countries which emerged, or which started new technologies, or industries with new technologies after being for a long time rural societies, and they, as such, they had to cope with a lot of social, very complex social problems, and also technological problems, and so on. So you would probably be surprised if you talk to people around 15 or 20 years of age who never saw a landline, simply because there were no landlines here, or only privileged people had them. And the country after 1989 moved very quickly into the age of internet and mobile phones and cell phones. And a lot of young people went into the high-tech industries. And this is what a lot of young people, educated people, prefer to do these days in the Czech Republic, to work for big international corporations or technological startups. And so this tension which I spoke about is can be felt everywhere, and the country is trying to cope with it. Czech society is trying to cope with it on many different levels. That's my short introduction, but I have 2 colleagues here who will talk in more detail about some of these things. One of them is, of course, our academic director, Vanda Thorn. Hello, Vanda. And our professor, or I should say beloved professor Salim Murad, who is joining us from southern Bohemia, where he lives. And I will start with Wanda. So Wanda, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Yeti. It's my great honor to be here today. Welcome everybody, whoever is listening right now or listening later on from the recording. My goal here is to introduce our site and Prague and Central Europe to you a little bit. And then of course I have my esteemed colleagues who will continue with their discussion. So let me share my presentation with you. So, as you probably suspect, Prague is a very, very interesting place to go. That's why we would like to tell you a little bit more about it. It is often called the heart of Europe because it is literally a geographical crossroads of Europe. It borders many different countries, which you can visit during your stay here. And it is literally in the middle of Europe between north and south and east and west. Since the fall of the communist regime in 1989, Prague is one of the Europeans' most visited cities. And I'm of course very proud to say that it has been routinely voted one of the most beautiful and most safe cities in the world. We have a very rich and turbulent history and culture. This is a place which may on the surface look a lot more homogenized than what you may be used to, but underneath it, it has a really interesting mixture, both ethnic, religious, cultural, historical. Historically, there had been Celtic tribes living here in the past, Germanic tribes. Now the population is mostly Slavic, but we also, of course, have rich Jewish history. There is even a little bit of Finno-Ugric influences, which is a very specific linguistic and cultural group. Hungary is, of course, a supreme example of that near us. And we have interesting ethnic groups and minorities that have gone through some turbulent times and challenges, such as the Roma minority, which had been called in the past the Gypsies. These are all parts of our curriculum, parts of our courses, for those of you who would be interested to find out more about that. This is, of course, a famous place for studying architecture, art. We have beautiful buildings everywhere. This is one of the best preserved towns, cities in the world. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. But you may be surprised to also see a lot of modern architecture here. I just put a famous statue of Franz Kafka into my little circle here, which is by famous artist David Czerny. But we also have buildings by famous architects like Frank Gehry and many others. So from this, you can see that, of course, we can still witness a mix of cultural influences here because of our proximity to many countries in Central Europe, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Poland, and so on. You can detect a lot of influences either in architecture. This is very much so the case for Italian and French influences in architecture. You can study French, German, English influences in literature and film. There are certainly German or Russian even influences in Czech music, Czech classical music. And you will not be surprised that there's a lot of influences and a lot of mixing in food, where you can find anything ranging from German and Austrian to Hungarian, Polish, maybe even a little bit of Russian influences as well. We have famous people that you may not know so much about now, but you may actually be using a lot of the products or art or enjoying art that they created for us. I wanted to mention just a few to give you an idea. Filmmakers such as Miloš Forman, Oscar-winning creator of Amadeus. Another Oscar winner, Jiří Menzel. We have famous writers. I'm sure that you all heard of Franz Kafka, who was born in Prague. Milan Kundera, very famous writer of the 20th century. And of course, Václav Havel, playwright who later became a president of the Free Czech Republic, initially Czechoslovakia and then Czech Republic. The musicians among you may know Antonin Vozak, very famous classical music composers, or Leoš Janáček. And again, you may be surprised that we also have some scientists that made quite an impact. If I go all the way back, it would be Johann Gregor Mendel, for example, the father of genetics. We have a course on brain and behavior that is a core course using still some of the knowledge that he gave us. We have a Nobel Prize winner, Jaroslav Hejrovský, in the field of electroanalytical chemistry. And we also have Otto Wichterle, the inventor of contact lenses that many of you may be wearing right now. So back to the connection of East and West and Central Europe and Prague standing in the middle of this. Away from the cultural influences, or in addition to the cultural influences, this is also an interesting site for studying history and historical transformations. This was a major point of tension during the Cold War, for example. Many historians called Czechoslovakia, which is what Czech Republic was then, when it was also combined with Slovakia, a Cold War buffer zone, which of course led to a lot of tension, uncertainty, but also potentially to influences from both sides of the ideological divide. And right now, we are again a center of going back, reconnecting with democracy, to democracy, with Western countries again. Central European countries, and Czech Republic is one of them, have of course gone through sometimes quite tumultuous transformation, political transformation, economic transformation, and most importantly also transformation in the civil society, building and rebuilding of civil society, which still continues. And this brings me to my last slide, which is present time and some of the exciting new developments that already Jiří Behe, our director, mentioned here. We have witnessed rapid developments in this country and in this part of Europe in new technologies, in new industries. And so in addition to the traditional ones, which still continue and which Czech Republic is perhaps famous for, such as car manufacturing, chemical industry, glass industry, and of course, beer, we have some exciting new developments that bring us to the forefront. Some of them are really very useful in this hard COVID period. I want to mention nanotechnology specifically. Just recently, Czech Technical University came with an amazing new discovery of anti-COVID fabric, which is made from nanotechnology materials. So these are very useful discoveries, and this is something that the government supports here, and this is also something that you would have opportunity to engage in had you considered being in Prague, for example, through a form of an internship. So biotech, applied in medicine, in environmentally friendly agriculture, for example, is another field that's very, very much booming. And of course, we have a famous film industry. This goes back several decades. We have a well-working system of international filmmaking here. Many Hollywood productions took place here. Famous movies like Mission Impossible, James Bond movies, Casino Royale. The latest Spider-Man movie takes place literally on Charles Bridge. If you watch it, remember Prague. And we have also new fields within media, such as video games, where Czechs again have become quite successful. I also want to mention artificial intelligence, which is booming in Czech technical universities, specifically in fields such as machine learning or cybersecurity, very interesting and important field, of course, game theory, or smart mobility, which will hopefully bring us very close to some really nice cars that we don't have to drive anymore, and they are just taking care of us and driving us everywhere. I can't wait. And of course, because this is a major tourist site, we have a booming tourism and hospitality industry as well. All top world hotel chains are here, all of the beautiful cultural venues, opera, concert halls, and so on. And of course, also some Michelin star restaurants and many others. So this is another interesting field to explore and study here as well. So this is just a very brief and, of course, in no way complete selection of some of the courses that we offer. I will be very happy to give you more information. Should you have any questions, should you have any inquiries, please do not hesitate to contact me. You can find all of the contacts for me and for our other esteemed presenters on NYU Prague's website. But you can see that we have a wide range of courses ranging from business-related, marketing, organizational communication to a huge selection of media courses, advertising, social media, digital games, film. But of course, we have a strong background in politics, history, sociology, and music, architecture, religion, languages, and we have core courses as well. So we are happy to welcome you. We can't wait to see you. I hope we will be able to see some of you at least in person. And I give the floor back to our director, Jiří Peher.
Thank you, Wanda. That was wonderful. I should mention, maybe before I forget, that when you talked about mixing of various cultures here and so on, that for a long time, because the Czech lands were part of the Habsburg Empire, and so it's quite often difficult to really tell who is a Czech historical figure, who is an Austrian or German historical figure. Sigmund Freud, for example, was born in Czech lands, in Moravia. In fact, Egon Schiele, the famous painter, was born in southern Bohemia, not far from where Salim is now, and grew up there. And Gustav Mahler, the famous composer, was born in the middle of Bohemia. So it's very interesting to see how Czechs appropriate or not appropriate this part of their heritage, but certainly there is much more than famous Czechs, ethnic Czechs, because we were for such a long time really part of this larger space. Maybe one more remark on the new world, so to speak, on new technologies and so on. The Czech Republic, according to the World Economic Forum, is now the 13th most globalized country, which has been caused by the fact that there are a lot of big international corporations, a lot of goods that are produced here are exported. The Czech Republic is a very strongly export-oriented country, actually in the European Union, probably the most export-oriented country. And as a result, a lot of these corporations that produce electronics, cars, and a lot of other things here experiment with robotics and other new technologies tied to artificial intelligence. So the Czech Republic, Czech industries are also among the most automated industries in the world. And if any of you are interested in new technologies, certainly the Czech Republic is a laboratory for researching this, because a lot of new factories here are just full of top technologies. But I will now move to Salim, who is waiting, and Salim, the floor is yours now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Director. I'm humbled by your introduction at the very beginning. I'm really happy I can be part of this conversation. And I'm also very glad that you mentioned actually this aspect of cultural diversity and the past, all those important historical and always very creative people who are born in this place. I would like to go a bit farther and ask you actually a question. What is Central Europe? And I would suggest to read this famous essay written by novelist Milan Kundera called Tragedy of Central Europe. And he presented Central Europe as this painting. So if you ask me what is Central Europe, for me, Central Europe is a rich mixture of colors, of tastes, of various music, of various architecture, and all in such a small place, actually. So I used actually this painting to portray what is Central Europe. And if you ask me to speak about geography, then of course, I would show you this map. This is a map of Central Europe, and it's a map of Bohemia, where Prague is situated, nowadays Czech Republic, Slovakia, Austria, Hungary, but also Croatia, also nowadays Poland, and each color represents one culture, one language, one ethnicity. So it was truly a great mixture of all of these colors together. And I know that the map doesn't look quite the same nowadays, because obviously there was a kind of a sad history. And I would like to speak a bit about this sad history, but only to portray that there is something new and exciting happening again. But now, let Milan Kundera speak again about Central Europe. So Central Europe, as was mentioned by you and by academic director Vanda several times, is geographically in the center. Culturally is in the west, and politically used to be in the east. Milan Kundera meant that in the 80s, when he wrote this essay, the Prague, Czechoslovakia, nowadays Czech Republic, was ruled from Moscow. But that's not true anymore since 1989. So there is a new exciting development when Prague and the whole country reconnected with Western Europe, and the new life started, life of a place which is a unique crossroad, as Vanda said, in between East and West, North and South. So I would give you a few examples of cultures which were historically defined mainly by languages, cultures which formed the Central Europe. And this enormous diversity could be perfectly shown on example of Franz Kafka, already mentioned by Vanda Thorn. Franz Kafka was exactly this example of cultural productivity, which is born out of so many cultures living in one small space. And that's actually the definition Milan Kundera gives us. It's a Europe made up of nations conceived according to one rule, the greatest variety within the smallest space. And when we see Prague on the picture behind you, what is actually the site of the New York University in Prague, because the campus sits exactly in this very historical town square, the most precious in the country. And even in this town square, you actually see that at one side was the beginning of a Jewish quarter, which was the second largest in the world after Thessaloniki, in Europe after Thessaloniki. And on other side, there was a Protestant church. And on the other side, the third one, there is a Catholic church. And there were also the German shops, Jewish shops, Czech shops, and shops of Ruthenians and Russians and Poles and Hungarians and Austrians. And they all lived together at a very small place. And out of this intercultural diversity came, for example, such a writer as Franz Kafka. Imagine, he was a bilingual. He spoke German and Czech. He wrote his famous novels in German. But the mother tongue of his father was Czech. And Franz Kafka was born literally at the very square where we can actually see our students running out of classes and enjoying the sun and ice cream on the square. And Franz Kafka was a Jewish. So for Milan Kundera and his definition of Central Europe, he is a perfect Central European, perfect Praguese, perfect Czech, exactly because of this diversity. When I speak about diversity, please have a look only on the main cultures which were represented in 1921 census in Czechoslovakia. So the Czech created only half of the population. Then were Slovaks, Germans, Hungarians, Ruthenians. By the way, Andy Warhol has a background in Ruthenian minority. His parents were born in Czechoslovakia, nowadays Slovakia, and then they moved to Pittsburgh, and he was born already in Pittsburgh, but he was of this minority background. Ukrainian, Russians, Jewish, Poles, Romanian, and actually many others. So, of course, we should also speak about the transition from the beautiful, colorful picture into these large blocks of colors. When the nationalism started at the end of 19th century and transformed, mainly through the Nazi occupation of Central Europe, transformed the Central Europe into this space. And this great diversity was suffering, of course, not only during the times of the Nazi German occupations in Central Europe, but also during the Soviet rule in Central Europe. But since 1989, this is over, and the new ethnic cultural diversity is flourishing, and Prague is one of the most cosmopolitan cities in Central Europe, where nowadays 20% of Pragueans are foreign-born. So why diversity and why such a stress on the cultural richness which comes out of diversity? You know, I am an old-fashioned scholar, so let me quote famous Czech political scientist Peter Pithart. The great centers of all world civilizations have always been a rich mixture of nations, cultures, faith, and ways of life. And that is why they were not just centers of spiritual activities. Only in recent times has Western Europe moved toward greater homogeneity, but that is balanced by its receptiveness towards newcomers. Homogeneity spiritually and culturally impoverishes. It sets limits on self-reflection as the highest degree of knowledge, self-knowledge. So now, in 30 years history of free, open, global Czech Republic and global Prague, we see NYU students, through their eyes, we can actually define who are nowadays Czechs and how they live. And we see that the Czech identity is mirrored in the eyes of a huge Vietnamese community, which is the third largest minority in the country. And we see a new life of the Roma Gypsy population. And we can speak about new cosmopolitan culture, which is created again, finally, after these years of the Nazi and Soviet rule, finally, in a free society, open society, we see again this cultural diversity to flourish. And when I say cultural diversity, of course, Wanda spoke about great classical culture of Prague, and you named also all the great composers like Mahler, and yes, you can taste it and you can experience it in Prague. And I have to say, actually, my students always love that actually they can do it in a very, you know, like economically friendly way, because the culture is open to the public and is rather easily accessible. And everyone can enjoy it, what is really good about the cultural life in Prague. But we should experience not only Prague as tourists see it, as you see it at this picture, as our students experience it together with tourists in the center of the city, but we should also go outside. These are my students who are on the outskirts of Prague, where they can actually really speak about the disciplining role of architecture and urbanism created during the Soviet rule. And they can really speak about Foucault's opinion on architecture and how it forms the identity of people. Or we can speak about new life, which is given to the diversity of Prague, thanks to the Vietnamese community. This is an NYU field trip to the Buddhist temple in the Sapa marketplace, which is a hub for cultural and economical life of nowadays Vietnamese community. It's a space where 5,000 Vietnamese are creating something so interesting that thousands of Czechs go every day to the Sapa marketplace, not only to enjoy the famous Asian cuisine, but also to, for example, contemplate in this wonderful Buddhist temple. And of course, I should mention our field trips to Český Krumlov. But again, it's not only about being happy as a tourist when you discover such a Renaissance miracle as Český Krumlov, another famous UNESCO site is. And you can enjoy, of course, for example, this well-preserved all-wooden theater, which is only one of 3 in Europe, which are intact and still standing, and you can enjoy them. But also you should visit the Roma community, which is thriving in Český Krumlov and actually replaced the former German minority, which was the mainstream culture in the city before the Second World War. And then during the Soviet rule, actually was sent to Germany as a collective punishment, unfortunately. But now there is a new way of life flourishing in Český Krumlov. And one version of the life is the Roma minority. And again, like our NYU students work as a kind of cultural interpreters in between the Czech mainstream culture and the Roma minority culture. And as you see, the Roma, they always enjoy our visits. They are very good in music and hip hop, and you can imagine that our NYU students are their new friends because they are coming from this environment of global NYU. So these are our jam sessions. These are our games. This is what we experience at our field trips. And as has this little girl on a t-shirt, don't forget to be awesome. And I hope that my presentation didn't bore you to death. Thank you so much.
Okay, Salim, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. I think that we have said maybe not everything we wanted to, but if we forgot about something, then certainly we are open to questions. So I don't know how we should go about these questions. Should they be sent in writing, or are participants about to ask directly? Mariam?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. It's just been a wonderful 40 minutes. I've so enjoyed this presentation. I guess, one thing I do want to ask a follow up on directly more is the Gypsies to Roma course, because I think that's one of those courses that students only really become aware of once they arrive to Prague. And again, because Prague is such an extraordinary city of contradictions as well. I think students often arrive with certain ideas about Prague just because they've seen photographs of it architecturally and all of that, and then they find out all sorts of other things. So can you go more in depth in terms of that course?
I can start, and I'm sure that Salim or Jiří will be probably adding some more details if I forget something. You're correct, Marianne, that students sometimes come expecting something, and then they, of course, discover many different things. They are initially very surprised that, of course, this on the surface looks like a very homogenized country. Many of our students are really not used to this because they come from countries with many nationalities, ethnic groups present in politics, in public life, and so on. So it may seem as if none of that is here, but as Salim was explaining, it is very much here. And if they take the class on Roma, I think they are up for an exciting and absolutely eye-opening discovery, because Roma have fascinating history in Central Europe. We have a professor who invites people both from the Roma community, scholars that focus on Roma. There is many field trips both within the city or with Salim to parts of the country which have living Roma communities. And the best part of it is always the one-on-one interactions that our students have with young people there. That's the most enriching experience, and it's absolutely transformative, not just for our students, but of course for the Roma students as well, for the young people, because they feel heard, they feel appreciated, seen. It's really transformative. I can't say enough about this, because this is such a huge boost to their confidence, to their push for recognition, and it's a miracle for them. And it's so nice to see our students, our NYU students, to bring this element to this country. It's wonderful.
If I may follow up for a moment, I would like to highlight that actually when we visit those Roma communities, it's like a community celebration for them. And for me, as a teacher who accompanied the NYU students on their journeys to the outskirts of the Czech Republic, where the Roma communities live, the large Roma communities, first of all, I had many ethical considerations actually, but then after the first field trip, they all fell apart because we were so genuinely welcomed, and the way the Roma community approached us was so embracing that actually they insist that we keep going there. And what I mean when I say that it's a community celebration, I would like to show you dances which they always teach us, and it's kind of a street party. And it's improvised, it's always genuine, and our NYU students love it. And when Wanda said that it's transformative moment, not only for our NYU students who are met with such a joy and really such a warm, welcoming atmosphere, but it's transformative moment also for the Roma students, because in the rather ethnically homogeneous outskirts of the Czech Republic, because Prague is very cosmopolitan, it's a center of tourism, of international study programs, but the outskirts of the country, they are not that diverse. And the Roma students are sometimes the only other in the communities, in the mainstream Czech community. And suddenly, when they are met with our diverse student body from New York University, where we have so many American, Asian students, they are actually inspired to dream big, to dream about new careers, studying at NYU, and it's truly transformative moment. And I promised you the dance, so give me a second. So this was the dance, which is a folklore dance of the Roma community, which was prepared for us, for our visit. But then we went the other day to the community center, and they were jealous that in the first community center, we had this dance performance, and they improvised and prepared a street party for us. So it was like amazing. Give me again a second. I will try to find it. Mm-hmm. So this is the street party. So that's what we experience in our field trips. Yeah. We should also speak about the classical music and concerts, where we go to the most fancy concert halls, where the famous Czech Philharmonic Orchestra performs the classical authors like Gustav Mahler, mentioned by Jiří Pehe. But you know, I prefer those Roma street dancers.
I have another question for you. So as scholars and historians, I know also, Wanda, you teach a course in collective identity, and we're sitting in a time, obviously, where the pandemic is a conversation in all locations, right? And how it's played out in different countries has varied greatly, also depending upon the history of those locations and cultural identity and all of that. Would you want to speak at all about how you imagine, or how things are going in Prague, and how you imagine Prague or the Czech Republic might emerge from the pandemic, perhaps in a different way, or what you might see happening with that at all?
So should I start? Okay. Well, I think that, you know, the Czech Republic is a very dynamic place, because 30 years ago, it started something completely new. It went through a process of really tremendous transformation, political, economic, cultural, we now have a vibrant civil society and so on. But it's still work in progress, so to speak, because of course, what we also see is a generational change here. We still have a lot of people who were formed intellectually and otherwise by the communist regime, by their experience during communism. And of course, their outlook is slightly different than, for example, the outlook of younger people who are, I would say, much more active in civil society, in working with new technologies and so on. So there's this, what I would call a generational divide, which is, by the way, very interesting to observe and even study. So that takes me to your question. What will happen after this pandemic? Well, the Czech Republic, of course, has been hit very hard by the pandemic, partly due to a degree of political mismanagement, one could argue, but also because it's, as Wanda and Salim have mentioned, it's a country in the middle of Europe, which is exposed to so many different influences. It's a place through which a lot of people transit, no matter what. So we have been hit quite hard, but at the same time, I think this is a useful lesson. This is a lesson in crisis management, in what to do about workplace, for example, in the future, how to organize it. A lot of people have moved, just like in some other countries, or a lot of other countries, to working from home, using home office. So I think this will be transformative, and it's very difficult to say at this point how it will transform the Czech Republic. But what I see already are some signs that we could see in the elections that will come in October this year, some change. That is the political parties that are mainly formed by or have been formed by younger people, especially, believe it or not, the Pirates. We have a party which is called the Pirates, and it is right now probably one of the most promising parties in the Czech Republic. So that these young people will take over, and so right now it's the Czech Republic is certainly a good place to visit, even for students of political science and sociology and so on, because I think we are right there at the point of a major change. Wanda?
Yes, I would just like to add to this from my point of view. Of course, one of the consequences of emerging from communism, being a very young and very inexperienced democracy at this particular difficult time, is a lack of media literacy. People are very prone to fake news. People are very prone to being manipulated by various media announcements. They have very low ability, especially the older generations, to critically read information, news, evaluate this. So one of our courses, social media, specifically focuses on fake news and on how this region deals with that, or rather doesn't deal with that quite well yet. So I think that's another huge part of the problem here, that people just aren't mature politically and as citizens, which also then opens the whole other can of worms in a civic responsibility, in a personal responsibility, and so on and so on.
If I may add to this, I wholeheartely agree with what Jiří Pehe and Wanda Thorn said. And I work every day in online classes with NYU students, but also with my Czech students. And I see that my Czech students are kind of sobering, because before the pandemic crisis, they had kind of comfortable life of a kind of well-off country, which is very safe. And for many of them, because of the low unemployment rate, they didn't worry about the future. For example, when I travel to Italy or Spain or Greece, as I frequently do in our MA in migration course, I see young generation which already before the crisis was very frustrated by their prospects, especially when it comes to jobs. But this was not true for Czech and Central European young generation. But now they see that they also need to be active and take the future into their own hands, that they cannot just rely that in the capital city, the central management will do it for them in the terms of transition of the country into the modern internet-driven, artificial intelligence-driven, creative businesses-driven economy. So they suddenly really see that it's up to them. And it's coming again and again in our talks, which I really have every single day. And actually, I see this as a really good opportunity. And I'm so sorry for all the lives lost during the pandemic, but actually this moment can be really potentially transformative moment in a positive way. The young generation wants to do something now. And also they are so skilled in the IT technology and in all the new creative businesses. So they are starting startups and they are connecting, in various hackathon competitions where they try to create new applications. So this environment is potentially very fertile soil for actually like positive future. They are very angry now. They are very angry now.
Well, thank you all for such a wonderful hour. We'll say thank you and goodbye. And for those of you who are attending, please stay on. We're going to load the slideshow so you can receive more information on NYU Prague. And don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. It was our joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.